to start the recording in progress. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our next webinar. Before we get started, I just want to take a couple minutes. My name is Anu Smalley. I'm the founder of Kapala Consulting Group. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, coach, alphabet soup behind my name, so to speak. I teach a lot of the Scrum Alliance classes. I do a lot of the IC Agile classes. And we as an organization, we work with the different multiple Agilists so that we can provide the services that our clients need. I am based in Atlanta, Georgia now. I'm no longer in Pennsylvania. Woohoo! As of just about under 2 weeks ago, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, sold the house, moved to Atlanta. So happy to be here in the South. We also have with us Lucy O'Keefe. Lucy is one of those Agilists that I've been working with for a long time. She heads up her own company, Dive Frog Consulting, and she is on her journey to become a CST, CTC, her own journey of collecting a lot of alphabets behind her name. Everybody's trying to get that alphabet soup, maybe. She has been working with Agile, I think, since for the last 9-10 years, and
Yep.
she's worked as a developer, product owner, Scrum Master, coach, amazing coach. So we both are here today to talk a little bit about facilitation. Lucy's been doing a lot of the Scrum Master as a facilitator, as a trainer. We did the Scrum Master as a coach. And then as we were talking about what do we want to talk about next time, we identified, we should try liberating structures because everybody's talking about them and they are a useful tool to get us started. So that's a little bit about us with logistics. Lucy, thanks for being here. Would you want to say a couple of words before I move on?
Just happy to be here again and collaborating with you and Kapala Consulting. Love working with you, of course. And for those of you that don't know, I know a lot of you have been in a lot of our webinars. Anu is my coach and my mentor as well. So we have a great friendship and relationship here. But I'm happy to be here and talk to you all about liberating structures. It's also one of the topics that some of you have recommended from previous webinars. So just so you know, we do look through those and we select from those topics what it is that we're going to be talking about next. So just happy to be here and share this this hour with you all.
Thank you, Lucy. Want to just talk a little bit about our next webinar. This is what I like to set you up for before we get into the meat of stuff today. Our next webinar is Monday, July 19th at noon. Lucy is going to be talking about scaling frameworks. So what are scaling options, scaling frameworks? Scaling is on everybody's mind these last few years. And so we'll kind of look at the different scaling options and what you can do and talk about some tips and tricks and some gotchas of scaling. So that will be Monday, July 19th. Hopefully you can join us. Plugging in Kapala Consulting if you're looking for any classes, if you're looking for any private classes, public classes, check out our classes. We are happy to have you here. And then finally, I want to offer up the communities of practice that we run. We are over summer, it's kind of become slow again, but the goal with this is, can we build a community and network of Scrum Masters, product owners, Agile leaders, so that we can build a community of practice to help each other out as we grow in our own skills, in our own Agile journeys. So hopefully some of you will be able to join us. With that, yes, I will put the community of practice links in the chat so you can grab them. And yes, I am absolutely a Georgia peach now. The first thing when we did was we actually got out and bought some Georgia peaches, and man, they were awesome. They do not taste the same in Pennsylvania. So thank you for being here today. With that, I'm going to hand over to Lucy to get us kicked off.
All righty, great. So as we get started, I just have to share this with you all. So when I first heard the term liberating structures, I was like, what the heck are liberating structures, right? I had never heard the term before. And then as I started looking at it, I was like, oh, those are liberating structures. I've used some of these, right? So a lot of times we may not have heard the term liberating structure, but I'm sure that as we go through the presentation today, a lot of you are going to be like, oh yeah, I've done that in a class, or I've done that in a webinar or an open space or anything like that. So don't let the term discourage you. It's probably something that you've been doing for years. So we're going to talk about those a little more today. So really liberating structures, it's a toolbox, right, of 33 different alternative ways of having meetings, facilitating meetings, and having conversations with either a large group of people or a team. They're really easy to learn. They embrace a distributed control, so it's not just one person that's talking all the time, right? So that's something that's really important to remember. They enhance coordination within the team or within the group. And they also enhance trust within that group because everyone is participating. And they promote a lively participation, right? So it's not a silo of one person talking and other people just listening. It's not a presentation. And so it's just a really great way to get people engaged and get people talking in groups of any size. It unleashes everyone that is involved. It is a disruptive innovation, right? If you think about the way that people have structured meetings before, right? It's very formal. So this is a way to disrupt those formalities that we've seen in the past. And it's far less controlling, far less constraining than the more conventional approaches that Anu is going to talk about briefly in a few slides here. So why should we use liberating structures? So as I've talked about in the previous one, we're used to those structures where it's one person talking, right? You have that one expert that is always talking and everybody's just listening. So not everyone is able to contribute to the conversation. So that is one of the reasons why we want to use liberating structures, get everybody engaged in those conversations. So liberating structures have minimal structure. It's not what we've seen in other ways of having meetings and having conversations. It's a great way for people to interact. They help spark innovation and inventiveness within the group with the liberating content and the subject matter. There's very simple constraints on liberating structures, and we're going to talk about some of those in the upcoming slides here. They unleash creative adaptability. They generate better than expected results. A lot of times when we have the more formal ways of having meetings and conversations, the results are very controlled, right? Because you only have one person speaking. So when you have multiple people speaking, there's a lot more that can come up and come out of that conversation. And each individual is highlighted when you're using liberating structure. So once again, it's not just about one person. And the wisdom of the whole collective is unleashed and it runs rampant in the conversation. So these are really great tools to use when you're facilitating these meetings, these gatherings, or even large group conversations within your organization. Mm-hmm. So liberating structures, there are some principles that we do want to follow when we're talking about liberating structure. So the first one, and I've talked about this a little bit, is that we want to include and unleash everyone. So we invite everyone, that is touched by a challenge or that have possible solutions to share those. So once again, it's not about just one person, it's about the collective. The second one is practicing deep respect for people and local solutions. So you want to engage the people that are doing the work. You want to engage everyone that's familiar with the content. So even in Agile, when we talk about people being self-managing, right? I think that kind of lends itself well to this, where the people closest to the solution or closest to the challenges have the ability to speak. Mm-hmm. The third one is building trust as you go. So we cultivate a trusting group within that collective, and everyone is able to speak the truth. The truth from everyone is valued, so really shows a lot of respect on that as well. Learn by failing forward. Do not have the fear of failing or the fear of failure, which a lot of organizations kind of make us feel like we should have. So embrace failing as a good thing, right? And that's how we learn. Once we fail, we learn more. The next one is practice self-discovery within a group. So engage groups to a maximum degree in discovering solutions of their own. Amplify freedom and responsibility. So specify minimum constraints, like I talked about before. There are some constraints that we're going to see in some of these liberating structures, but let go of the over control, when we are talking about liberating structures. Emphasize possibilities, so believe before you see, expose what's working well, focus on what has been accomplished, so make sure that you are doing that. Invite creative destruction to enable innovation. So convene your conversations about what is keeping people from working well on the essence of their work, so have those creative moments, right, about what is not working well. Engage in seriously playful curiosity. So stir things up. Don't be afraid to do that. Do it with improv, do it with paradoxical questions. Try to spark a deep exploration within the group, that you're dealing with or that you're facilitating, and never start without a clear purpose. So that's very important. A lot of these liberating structures that we're going to go over, there is a time box to every single one of them. So if you're not clear on what it is that you are trying to accomplish when you're using those liberating structures, you're not going to reach the outcome that you are looking for. So these are the 10 principles of liberating structures. These are things that you should be thinking about every time you are using them. And every single one that we're going to be going through, will help you see how these principles apply.
Awesome. So I want to jump in a little bit and look at these structures from a different perspective. So Lucy talked about how when you have fewer people running meetings versus everybody having the ability and the capability to facilitate what the impact of that learning in large groups, we create more engaging spaces for our team, for the groups that we are facilitating. So this is where we talk about, when you look at the organizing structures that exist, the conventional ones, these are presentations, managed discussions. Unfortunately, a webinar as such as what we are doing is more on the over-controlled one, because there are two people who are going to present information and you get to do a little bit of interaction. What we want to shift toward is more towards the under-controlled, which will allow us to do more brainstorming, more open discussions, allow a lot of ideas to flow to the top, and not just those of the people who are doing the presentation. So these are what liberating structures calls microstructures. So these are different ways that we apply and approach the different interactions we have on a daily basis, whether it's meetings, it's conversations, it could be lunch and learns. However you do that, these allow you to shape how you're going to manage and hold your conversations and meetings. There are two things that I'm going to talk about. There's microstructures and design elements, and every liberating structure has those. We have what we call microstructures. That is, every conversation that we have certain thing. So for example, for this webinar, our microstructure has been, we are going to be doing a presentation. It's a shared presentation between Lucy and I, and we have who's going to do what, when do we start, when do we end. We have some structure around that. These are, so when we do microstructures, we have, as I said, we have presentations, managed discussions, status updates, brainstorming, and open discussion. Every liberating structure tries to move away from the presentation and towards the brainstorming and open discussion. So when you are creating a meeting, having a conversation, think about, what are you used to doing? Are you always used to managing conversations in a meeting? So in your daily Scrum, do you go around the room and say, all right, Tammy, you're up first. What did you do yesterday? What did I do today? Are you doing that? Are you figuring out how to get your team to brainstorm and have open discussions? Microstructures are formed with habit. So we want to bring awareness to the fact that there is a continuum of microstructures and that we need to move to the right and step away from the left. Right? Foundational idea behind the liberating structures. Every liberating structure, there are 33 of them, as Lucy said, every liberating structure has 5 basic elements to it. And when we walk through a couple of them, we'll call out these 5 elements. So the first element is make an invitation. You're going to invite people to do something, to go somewhere with you, to attempt an option to talk, draw, listen, act, do improv, whatever it is. It's an invitation. The second design element is we want to make sure we are identifying how are we distributing participation. So is it going to be 3 people groups? Is it going to be a triad? Is it going to be a pair? How are we ensuring that everybody is getting to participate? How do we ensure that participation is happening? Then we have to configure groups. Is it going to be like what we have now is we have 2 presenters in one group? Or if we do breakout rooms, how many breakout rooms, how many people per breakout room? We're going to look at that stuff. Arranging the space, what do you need or the materials? I need Zoom, I need breakout rooms, I need murals, I need Miro. What is it that you need? And then finally, a sequence of steps and events. We want to make sure none of these liberating structures is like, go do whatever you want to do, whatever your heart desires. It is structured. It tells you this is best done in a 40-minute time box and use the time box in this way. So these are, every liberating structure is designed with variations of these 5 elements. These elements say this is the minimum specification for the use of this structure. And we want to make sure as you use this, you inspect and adapt as things go on. And we're going to point out with the virtualization of work over the last year and a half, a lot of liberating structures have gone through inspection and adaptation to apply them in our virtual world. There are 33 liberating structures. We are going to review 5, right? And we got to pick the 5, and we picked the 5 we like the most, or at least for me, what I've used the most. So Lucy's going to do a couple, then I'm going to do a couple. All right, Lucy, back to you.
Alrighty, so as Anu said, we're going to go over 5 of the 33 liberating structures, and I am going to start with impromptu networking. It's a way to rapidly share challenges and expectations, make loose connections, as it says here. And a lot of you have probably participating in impromptu networking without knowing that that's what it was called. I know I have, and in some of my certification classes with Anu, actually, I know that was one of the ways that we've started our classes, with getting to know each other. So it's a good way to kick off those conversations or a session within a team or a group, especially when you don't know a lot of people, which is what happens in a lot of public certification classes, for example. So it involves people getting to know each other and getting into pairs and rapidly sharing something with one another. And this is something that you do in 3 rounds. Each round is about 2 minutes. And you get to know people, right, during that time. So Anu just talked about 5 of the design elements of liberating structure. So I'm going to go over a little bit what those are for impromptu networking so that you have an idea, right? So the first one is structuring an invitation. How would you invite people to participate in impromptu networking? So, there's a few questions that you could ask people to discuss during those rounds. What is a big challenge that you're bringing to this gathering or this class, right? That could be one. Or what do you hope to get from this class or from this group? And what do you think that you're going to be giving back to this group, right? So those could be ways to invite people to have those discussions. The way that space would be arranged, of course, it would differ whether it's virtual or not. If it's not virtual, then there's an open space, right? A lot of times we've gathered in the middle of a room and started pairing up with people and doing that. Of course, if it's virtual and we're using Zoom, we would have breakout sessions that people would get in and have those conversations. Participation, how is that distributed? So everyone is included, right? One of the things we talked about is how in liberating structures, we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak and has a chance to be included. So everyone's included and they all have an equal opportunity to contribute to the conversation. The groups here are configured in pairs, like I said in the beginning, preferably strangers, or if they are colleagues from the same company, not people that they work directly with. So a lot of times, you know, if you have like a manager and a direct report, for example, in the group, you don't want them to be paired together, right? So you want them to talk to people that they don't talk very often. So that's how you want to group those people. When it comes to the sequence of steps and the time allocation, I talked about how there are 3 rounds of these. And each round there's 2 minutes per person for them to answer questions from each other. So about 4 minutes, 5 minutes per round. So that's how the impromptu networking is structured. But why would we do impromptu networking, right? I think it's important to know when it would be a good time to do that. So it initiates participation immediately, right? At the beginning of a session, a class, a group, an open space, whatever it is that you're doing. It attracts a lot of engagement amongst people and around challenges that people may be having. It invites people to deepen some of their stories, you know, and repeat those to different people, which may give them more insight afterwards. It helps those people who are shy to warm up to others, right? If you're only talking one-on-one, you can't choose not to have that conversation. Right. So introverts, you know, are able to speak up in impromptu networking as well. It affirms the individual contributions to any solution that we're talking about. It emphasizes the power of connections, right? Even if they're loose connections, these are people that you know really well, but you are making new connections, and it's emphasizing that connection with that one other person each round. And it also suggests that little things can make a big difference, right? So in those 2 minutes that you're talking to somebody, there's probably something that you're going to say that is going to make an impact on somebody else. So that is why we should be using impromptu networking.
You know, and I've often found that when the question you pose, the invitation that you pose to the group is very crucial. I've used impromptu networking in classes, the beginning of a class, as Lucy said, to say, all right, everybody get up, go to the back of the room, 2 minutes, pair up with somebody, introduce yourself, share something important, whatever about something. And then we say, all right, everybody go pick another partner. And then go pick another partner. What it does is it gets everybody getting to know each other. It's about bringing the energy level up. It's about getting to know each other. And like Lucy said, the introverts, it gives them an opportunity to speak up, get comfortable in the room. So this is one of my favorite techniques to bring a large group of people, either to get them started or to make sure everybody's voice is heard around the topic. So,
yep.
All right, so that's one. The second one is this one.
Yeah, so the next one that we're going to talk about is 1, 2, 4, all. If you're doing it virtually, it may not be 1, 2, 4, all, because that is how many people are involved in each round. So it may be a little difficult to do that virtually. So it could be 1, 3, all, 1, 4, all. And I'm going to go a little bit into what this is, but really this is used to engage everyone simultaneously. So they generate questions, ideas, and suggestions, as you see here. You can integrate this into any meeting that you have. So it doesn't have to be at the beginning of, you know, a large session or anything like that. It could be to talk about anything. It's a great way of easing people into participating and discussing something, especially if there are people in the group that have a tendency to be quiet, right? So talking about those introverts, again, this is a great way to draw them into the conversation. As well. So first, what we do is we reflect on something. So there's usually a question, a topic, or an idea that we want to discuss for 1 minute individually. So that's the 1, right? And the 1, 2, 4, all. Then you discuss that same topic or idea in a pair, right? So that's the 2. Then you're going to get in groups of 4 and discuss the same thing. And then everyone comes together and have a group discussion. Once again, if it's virtual, you may not do the 2 part, right? So we don't have so many breakout rooms that we have to go ahead and set up. But that's the idea, right? To think about those ideas, challenges, or options individually, then in pairs, then in a larger group, and then as the whole group. So when it comes to those design elements, again, the way to structure the invitation is to ask a question, right? Again, we're asking a question in response to the presentation or the issue that we are talking about, or the problem that we are trying to resolve. And it's about getting people to come up with a proposal, right? To put forward regarding that issue that we are talking about. The space is arranged, of course, unlimited number of groups. If you are and you're not virtual, I think it's kind of the same idea that we had for the impromptu networking. You got to make sure there's a lot of room for movement. If you are doing it virtually, you're going to have to set up a lot of breakout sessions, of course. But that's one way that you would set up, and that's why we want to have less groups, right? Instead of having 1, 2, 4 all, just have 2 breakout sessions maybe, and then the overall group. The way that participation is distributed here is, once again, everyone is included, which I think you're going to see in every single liberating structure, right? The facilitator is not included. Once again, if you attended my Scrum Masters Facilitator webinar, you know that facilitator does not participate. So that is true here as well. And everyone has an equal opportunity to contribute, just like everything else. So the way that the groups are configured, we talked about that already. So first you start alone, then in pairs if you're not doing it virtually, then with a smaller group, which is 3 or 4 depending, and then with the whole group, right? Everyone who's involved in that session. So that is the 1, 2, 4 all. And once again, you figure out when you're doing it virtually what would work best. Not dictating what those numbers should be. It depends how many people you have overall. You want to make sure that there's enough room for conversation and engagement with everyone that's in that session. Anything to add here?
I've used 1, 2, 4 all. I've tried to use it in a virtual session once. I had about 80 people in the group, and the reason I have not done the 2 is I broke everybody into pairs, and then it took me about 15 minutes to merge pairs into a room. Like Zoom breakout room. That was a pain. So that's why we say do the 1, 3 all or 1, 4 all, but no more than 4, because beyond 4, voices don't get heard.
Yeah.
But I've used 1, 2, 4 all for all kinds of things, and it becomes really interesting because you hear a lot of voices. Great technique for a retrospective, by the way. Fantastic technique to generate ideas and bring data points out for a retrospective. Right. I'm going to dig into the next one, which is it's called What, So What, Now What? Is the 3W, W cube. The approach for this is, can we get the attendees for whatever you're doing, a meeting, a retrospective, a sprint planning, just a chat, a workshop, can we get them all to work together, to look backwards and say, what have we done so far? And decide what is the next thing. So this is your inspect and adapt process, but just looking at it from a very different way. The way we start with this is, and the ladder of inference is very important. So you start at the bottom and you go, I'm going to look at the bottom up and say the bottom is the what. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at data. So what happened? The invitation here is, what did you see? What facts, observation? Look, but we have to start with data. If you don't start with data and you start at the top, just the action, you may be taking the wrong action. Just like a retrospective, you do the root cause analysis. So you start with the what, and then you go, all right, so you identified what happened. So what? What do you make of it? How is it connected to you? What does it mean to you? So that's your next step of the so what. Okay, big deal. And the once you as a group agree on the so what, or why is this a big deal, then you say, all right, let's now take an action. now what? So the what, so what, now what is a great technique, great structure to say, how can I get people to look backwards together and say, what happened? And then say, that happened. So, and then based on that, where is our next step? We want to make sure the groups here are smaller groups, doesn't have to be for no more than a Scrum team, right? 7, 9 people, no more than that. We do not want to expand beyond that. In an in-person class, in an in-person thing, you would do groups of chairs. But in a virtual class, I'm going to talk about what are your options in a virtual session in just a minute. But the sequence is just that we spend a few minutes individually first to say individuals work alone. So maybe for a minute and say, so what happened? What did I notice? And then we get small groups together to say, all right, is your what the same as my what? And then we get into a few minutes of so what, and then go on to the now what. The idea with this is we want to build shared understanding of here's what happened, but we take different things away because we assign our own meaning to the what. So can we create a shared understanding of what happened, why is that important, and what's the next step? So of course, because people are amazingly brilliant human beings, somebody said, oh, let's come up with some online virtual options. So there's a mind mapping template that's used. It starts off on the inside, which is the topic. So what's your topic that you're going to look at? And then you start with the diamond shapes here are all the what's. So what did you see? What did you observe? The rectangle shapes are the so what? And the circles around are next, now what? So you do a mind mapping activity where each group does the what, so what, now what. And the one on the right is a mural template. I don't know if Miro has a template. I work in Mural. So if somebody is a Miro person, check it out, let us know. But same thing here. You start on the outer circle saying, what happened? So everybody works together. They fill out the what, then they come in to do the so what, and then the innermost circle, now what? So lots of virtual options as well to use these liberating structures. Right? I've used the mural template and it works really well. And you're right, Mark, this is why we as facilitators need to pay attention to the design elements. If you just throw people in and say, all right, go do what, so what, now what, it's going to be a disaster. You have to facilitate the conversation. Everybody will understand the what. Maybe they see the same what, but the so what could be very different for each human being. You get to make sure you're creating that structure to facilitate and guide and facilitate some conversation. There may be conflict coming up, so you need to pay attention to that. So if you're doing this in your Scrum team as a retrospective, you have to be on top of facilitation. If not, it can go really bad. Right? All of these structures are the same way. They require some facilitation, but what they do is they give you a structure to follow as you facilitate instead of a free for all. Right? Thank you, Emily. Miro template in the chat window. Wonderful. So that's the third one, the what, so what, now what. This next one is, I think I would say the next two are things I've used in class, multi-day classes, I've used these. The first one is drawing together. How do you create a shared understanding of what has happened? But the drawing together says, can we figure this out only using non-verbal expressions, only through drawing, no words, only pictures. I've used this often where if I've had a multi-day class, on day 2 of a class, I've given people blank pieces of paper or mural space and said, using only drawings, no words and no speaking, can you draw what you learned yesterday? So a retrospective, draw what happened in the sprint. No words, no talking, because when you start talking, people kind of shut people down. Just give them a blank space and say draw, and you can tell them, we use 5 symbols in this particular liberating structure, which is the circle, which is talking about the wholeness. What is the overall picture you're trying to do? The rectangle, what support do you need or have you provided? Triangle, what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? The spiral is the change that's happening or needs to happen. And then the star person is the relationship, your human being. So you may say, I as a person have this goal. So you may create a circle and put a star person and a triangle there to say, my whole picture is that I have a goal. But you are representing what you're saying in pictures, not words, or using any verbal conversation. I've used this technique to kind of do a retrospective. I've done this to create a vision, a product vision, because everybody fights over what the product vision is supposed to be, or even a team vision. What is your shared purpose? So draw pictures, because pictures speak 1,000 words, and people look at each other's pictures and go, huh, that's what you got from that? And then the conversation is not about fighting each other, but trying to understand what the other person is saying. So drawing together brings people together with images, with drawing. It's not about the quality of your drawing, right? Nobody's asking you to be a Picasso. It's about, can you visualize what you've learned and then talk about it? We've done this often for trying to get, if you have a team in storming, for example, and they refuse to get out of it, do drawing together to identify, why is this team not going anywhere? Because when you use words, sometimes words get in the way. But images, once the image is drawn, then you can talk about it. You can also use this in conjunction with 1, 2, 4 all. You can have each person draw, then have pairs share each other's drawings, then bring them in fours, and so on. So combine, mix and match liberating structures as you see fit. I love this technique. I think this is just brilliant to get people to think it through, to draw out what they truly think without any anchoring ideas or anchoring thoughts from any other human being, right? So drawing together. The last one, I've started using this in more of my advanced classes or my coaching classes. It's called the Troika consulting. The Troika consulting is your ability to get help from people who you trust immediately. Great technique to use in a community of practice, for example, if you want to practice your coaching. So if you join a coaching program with me, you do a lot of Troika consulting. What does that look like? As Liberating Structures defines it, we ask, there's trios, so Troika, 3 people. There's a client, a coach, and a coach. Or if you do a coaching dojo, it becomes a client, a coach, and an observer. Either way, the client says, face to face, 3 people together saying, okay, I am struggling with X. And then in Liberating Structures, I turn my back to the colleagues who are going to help me. And they are going to talk about, so maybe we can do this. And the 2 people are discussing how to help the client without the client saying the word. Their back is to them. So they're not seeing facial expressions or body language. They're just listening. It's, can you do completely active listening to what the discussion is happening? And then that happens for a few minutes and you turn back around and say, all right, so what did you hear, the ideas? And then they have a discussion. And so the way this works in a pure Troika is the client says, this is my challenge. The 2 other people ask some questions. The client turns around. The 2 people generate ideas, they talk, they do suggestions, they do advice, just about 5-6 minutes, not too much. And then the client turns around and says, the most valuable thing I picked up from that was X. And then you rotate the roles. I use a form of Troika consulting in my coaching classes so that we can do a coaching dojo so every person gets to practice coaching and you get feedback on your coaching. Again, great technique to bring in. We are trying to solve a problem. If you have 9 people in a team and you're trying to solve one problem, do Troika consulting, 3 groups, and every person rotates. Can you imagine the number of ideas and suggestions you might come up with? Because it's no longer one person trying to say, okay, I've been around for Kingdom Come, so I'll give you all the ideas. I'll tell you what to do next. Instead of that, you are saying, pair up, co-create ideas for a person, because each one of us will explain the challenge in a different way. You come up with so many ideas that then you can go take into a different kind of structure and figure out how to prioritize and practice these. So again, when we were trying to figure out which out of the 33 to you to share with you, we picked the ones that I've used the most and Lucy's used the most and said, let's share these. And I'm going to give you a bunch of resources to help you learn more into this, right?
Yeah, and Anu, before we move forward,
Yeah.
there were 2 questions regarding the drawing together one that we didn't touch on. One of them was, can we only use those 5 symbols?
So if you're purely doing liberating structures, yes, only those 5 symbols. I have done things where I've created different symbols that they can use. The reason for those same symbols is the symbols now mean the same thing to every person. And I don't have to start saying, well, Dana had a squiggly line and Mario had a squiggly line. Do the squiggly lines mean the same thing to the 2 people? We are removing that confusion of vagueness, and we're creating a drawing dictionary, so to speak, and we use the same things. If you have other symbols you want to use, make sure you are creating a definition and that everybody knows what that symbol means. So when we're looking at 2 images with the same symbols, we kind of can grasp what they mean and not say, so what does that symbol mean to you? Then you're going to veer away from the purpose of the activity.
Right. And the other question, I think it kind of piggybacks on that one, is have you tried this technique using workflow symbols? So I think it's,
again, as long as the workflow symbols have a meaning, shared meaning, you're golden. Right? So those are 5, and we'll give you a little more information now. Lucy's going to give you some tips on this.
Right. So we have some tips on how you should be using liberating structures, or what you should do when using liberating structures. So the first one is say as little as possible, right? So you, as a facilitator, you don't want to be the person that's talking the most when you're using these liberating structures. So you can just share what the purpose of the liberating structure is. If there are some instructions, you can go ahead and share those, but just don't do a lot of that. So because the less that you talk, the more space you're giving others to talk. So make sure that you are saying as little as possible. The next one is try to stick to the suggested timings, right? So there are time boxes for every single one of the liberating structure. So just like in Scrum, we want to try to stick to our time boxes, or we should be sticking to our time boxes. You want to do the same here. And the reason to that is, if you need more time to go deeper, just create another liberating structure. Don't try to extend it or run over time, because then you're going to fall into this trap of having loose, open discussions again, which is not the objective of the liberating structures, right? So just try to stick to that. The next one is display a timer so that the time left is visible, right? So If people don't know how much time is left, then they may not be doing what they're supposed to be doing as they're using these liberating structures. So, if you're doing it virtually, even just on Google Chrome, you can set up a timer and make sure that people know how much time is left. If it's in person, there's ways for you to do that as well. So just make sure that you're displaying that. The next one is enforce silent individual reflection when required. So just make sure that people have time to do individual reflection. So when we talked about the 1, 2, 4, all, for example, right, the first part of that is individual reflection. So make sure that we are enforcing that people are doing that, and then they're just not, chit-chatting with somebody else, or just, looking at their text on their phone or something like that. Really make sure that people are doing the work that needs to be done during that individual reflection time. The next one is display key instructions when deemed helpful. So it's not that you have to put every single detail of how the liberating structures need to take place, but some key ideas, right? For example, 1, 2, 4, all. 1, you're going to be by yourself. 2, you're going to pair up with someone. 3, you're going to be in a group of 4, and then we're all going to come together. That's it. Don't have to have a lot of details, but just make sure people understand what's supposed to be going on, especially virtually. Sometimes I think it's important, if they're on the mural board or a mural board, that those instructions be there, but just do the just enough information, right? It doesn't have to be a lot of information. The next one is be aware of your space or your virtual room for people to interact, right? So if you're virtual, make sure you have enough breakout rooms in Zoom, for example, that people can go ahead and interact in smaller groups of people. If you are in person, make sure that there's room for people to move around, right? If we're talking about impromptu networking, for example, don't make it difficult for people to go talk to different individuals. So make sure that we have the room for that. And the last one is make them your own, right? The more you learn about these liberating structures, the more that you start using them, you're going to know which ones you like to use, which ones you don't like to use, which ones are more comfortable for you. And, you can make little tweaks here and there without really losing the essence of what the liberating structures are, but do what's more comfortable for you, because it's very easy for others to see when you are trying to do something that maybe you don't have the knowledge of, or you're not comfortable doing, right? So make the little tweaks that are necessary in order to make them more successful. But those are the tips.
Yeah, and remember, inspect and adapt. That's what Agile is all about, right? So as some of you guys talked about, what other symbols can I use? Make it your own. I've done this where I've worked in a particular industry where certain symbols mean certain things. Bring those in, right? So use what works best for you in the situation, but make sure that there is a shared understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing before you get started.
Exactly.
Right. There's some resources that I want to bring in. There is liberatingstructures.com website, right? Brilliant website. There is, you can print out, so you can print out your liberating structure card deck. You can you can print out the matchmaker handout, which says when do you use what and why, the purpose. There is an app now, because everything is going virtual. There's an app for liberating structures. There's an app for that, right? So go get that app if you're interested. And there is a Slack group. In the Slack group, I'm a member of the Slack group, and all my virtualizations of LS, I've learned from the Slack group. Somebody tries something somewhere and I go, oh, that's cool. I'm going to try that. So there's lots of information out there. So check those out. I have the LS card deck downloaded. I have that on my computer. I use that often when I'm teaching facilitation. I bring that in. I haven't used the app too much, but I do find the app is very easy to use. I've seen a friend use it, and she's like, okay, let's see which one. Oh, I'm going to do this one. Because remember, we want to focus on the design elements and the purpose. It's a very quick refresher on which one is what and why, and brings you back in. There are also people who do liberating structure classes. If you're interested in learning, taking a class on it, check out the website. I think there's some information there. I personally have learned it by downloading the stuff and reading and just trying different things and talking to people and say, so what have you tried? Oh, that's a good way. I'm going to go try that. Right. All right. So that's the resources and next steps. Check those out. And I'm going to hand back to Lucy for reflection.
So you guys have, learned a lot about liberating structures today, have gotten some tips on those, what they are, what the purpose is for using liberating structures. And we went over these 5 liberating structures today. So just put on the chat what your reflection is for today's webinar, right? What have you learned that's new? What liberating structure that we talked about is one that you feel you really want to try out? Just anything that you've learned from today's webinar that you felt was really helpful, that you want to share with us, or if you want to, just speak, you can unmute yourself and do that as well.
Let us know what you're taking away. Drawing in silence, then sharing. Yep, my favorite.
Yep, I was gonna type it in, but I was like, I can talk too. I like the drawing together. I like that, and I like the point of having, knowing that we should have the symbols and definitions for the symbols, because I stated in the chat, I've done something similar to that before, but it wasn't explained to that detail prior to. So when we broke out into the different groups on the call and came back to talk about the symbols that we drew, everybody was drawing all these different, animals and other things and shapes, and it kind of made sense, but this makes more sense. So yeah. I'll definitely use this at some point. So thanks.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you. Have you? Yes, I have, Mark. This was one of my very first few experiences. It was the 1, 2, 4 all, and it was I was facilitating and I blew it, and I didn't explain well. I didn't give them clear instructions. Nobody knew what the heck the question was. Everybody had a different idea of what the question was. This was at a client side. I was doing a Scrum Foundation class, and I thought I would do this, and I forgot it was 1, 2, 4 all. I just went 1 all, and I just made a complete mess. And it was not good. Fortunately for me, I had a colleague with me who came back and said, so let's just take a big failure bow and start over. I'm like, all right. And then he facilitated and he did it well, 1, 2, 4 all. And what I noticed was, yes, make it your own, but know that you're making it your own, and don't try and make stuff up to ignore the fact that you didn't know what you were doing. So I was trying to hide the fact that I didn't know what I was doing, and that kind of showed up and it blew up in my face. So know what you're doing, practice well, prep well. And if you're going to make it your own, know what you're going to do and why. Mm-hmm. That's my biggest takeaway from that.
Yeah, so Stephanie, for me, I've done 1, 2, 4 all and impromptu networking virtually, and there really isn't a lot of difference from being in person and doing it, and those have worked well. From what I've seen. Anu, what others have you tried virtually that were successful?
I've done Troika Consulting. I've done the drawing together, but I've used Mural, not Zoom whiteboard, because the Zoom whiteboard, I never got comfortable with, but I've used the Mural. I've also used Google app, Google Word, Doc, whatever it is, to draw stuff. I have an activity that I did with the drawing together where I have in Google Docs, I have a slide that says, here are the shapes, this is what the shapes mean. And then everybody in my class actually created a copy of that, and they drew their own image, and all the images were in one place. I'm happy to share that Google Doc as well, if that might help you. I've done, there are a couple of others in there. The what, so what, now what has worked. There are a few others up there. There's the crowdsourcing, open space, 80/20, there are a lot of structures that I have used. I think you have to take a pause and look at the group you're facilitating for and define which one will work well with that group virtually. I know I have one group of people who are very left brain people. I would never use drawing together for them because they wouldn't draw a thing. Right. For them, I use the more of the what, so what, now what, so they can analyze and structure and create comments. So.
Yeah. Great questions and great insights. So we're at the end of our time box for today. So I want to make sure that Anu has a chance to close out the webinar before everybody has to drop for your next meeting.
Yep, thank you. And we can hang out for a little minute as well. So remember, next webinar coming up July 19th. We'll see you there. If you have any topics that you would like us to do a webinar on, stick them in the chat window and I'll be happy to bring them in. You have the Slack groups in the chat. I'll send it, you'll get an email from me as well. After this will be recorded. This will be posted on YouTube, posted on the website. You'll have links to the PDF as well as the recording, as well as the Slack communities. I'll send them all out in an email. So thank you for being here. This was fantastic. I'm happy to see a bunch of people here. Thank you for being here. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.